Hello everybody, and welcome to a bit of what I consider a sort of white whale or holy grail, whatever you want to call it, kind of run that I've been sort of quietly grinding out in the background here for about, I think, going on like 3 years now. 2 or 3 years, something like that. But basically, this is just sort of a... I mean, I like to call playing Tactics Ogre as a roguelike, but basically the rule set of this thing is fairly simple. You are one person, it's a complete solo, however, you cannot restart. If Denam dies at any point, you're starting over from scratch, and you can't use the store, you can't use crafting, you can't use retreats, you can't use Chariot, any of that nonsense. Basically, it's just a straight faceplant throughout the entire game, and just kind of seeing how far you can get with it. 9 times out of 10, this results in instant tragedy repeatedly, and the kinds of crap that you run into can get pretty insane, so let's go ahead and get the start right off the bat. Now, I like to answer these questions randomly at the start. There really is no kind of optimal thing to start with. You might say Dex, Dex would be the obvious one, so obviously we had to make that the lowest. That was unintentional, that was a total accident, but whatever, that's what we're going to roll with. Basically, I like to have a random character at the start, like I said. So this is the Stubborn Rich Challenge, and/or the Florida Man Run, as we're calling it this time. So as always, we start off sending out everybody naked up to the front. We give a short bow to Denam, decide to betray Kashua, get stuck in a little standoff with everybody here, as you do. Don't end up getting very much at the start, but right off the bat out of the tutorial, we're picking up Anatomy to give kind of just a general bonus to everything, at which point we've leveled up a little bit so we can use the Lombardia. We betray everybody, as you do. Basically just running around one-shotting everybody. We want to collect the consumables on this map in order to have more buff items later. Just get as much as we can from the start. Go with the Order of Gator Boat. By the way, you may notice if the perspective of these pictures is a little bit off at any point, that's because this was the first run I attempted to do with the Retroid. Long story short, I no longer have the Retroid. This was not a viable format to do it with because for some reason they kept changing perspectives randomly. I'll change that as soon as I notice it, but moving on. So I answered... so I will say right off the bat, for this one I decided that Denam is just going to be the worst person in existence, so I went ahead and insulted every character I could throughout the entirety of the run. Including at the very start, which gave us gave us a second short sword, not that we really need it, as well as the sword and buckler, but doesn't know how to use them. Amazon, as is the meme. We make Vice disappear, she disappears, and then Canopus gets incinerated, as he does. If you leave him completely alone, it doesn't go well for him. So yeah, we go around, we clean up the map. I don't believe we even had to use a healing item for this first one. Basically, we're relying on the fact that we've power leveled a couple extra class levels on Denam. Now, generally, class levels are not going to matter too much, but they are something that we're going to want to manipulate pretty much constantly. But we've already gotten up to 15% proficiency with swords just off that first map alone, not even counting Anatomy. Pick up some Field Alchemy so we can make use of some better healing items, and then we're going to stick with Knight for now to work on those Vigor upgrades, as well as just using the class's innate defense to keep us all nice and sturdy. We have Donalto over here apologizing to the skeletons for being so mean to them. Tries to hit him with a stick anyway. You know how this goes. It doesn't go well for anybody here. Our liberators are here. It's just the one guy. He's already backstabbing everybody. This is not concerning at all. I actually noticed multiple times now that I really should have been putting resist stun on earlier. Not that it's any threat. His Zur necklace gives him immunity to stun, but it's something that you can rank up to rank 2 earlier on, so that later on you can actually switch over to something like a Vigor Ring. Ended up burning through my first healing items over here on the Moldova fight, but as usual, she takes only a couple of hits. Most of the punishment that you're taking is from all the ranged attacks that you're taking on the way over. This is why we switch over to Knight and have that as our class. You can stick to Warrior and just make use of the extra levels, but Knight is going to be more useful in the long run. It just has more access to stuff that we need. So either way, we take Moldova out. Swords are looking pretty good at this point, though that was not a terribly long fight, so only get a little bit extra proficiency. But due to the fact that we leveled up Knights, we get access to NSPs early, as well as some gauntlets. If you didn't know, with Voltaire and Sarah, You can basically manipulate their spawns to have class leveled equipment. So if you have knights leveled up, you get appropriate levels for that. If you have archers leveled up, you get appropriate levels for that. There's some of the few cases where they actually will come in with their full setup that way. All right. We got Lennar coming in with a Morningstar. Now, this is why most of the time I ended up going with hammers as my starting primary skill, but I ended up doing it a little bit differently this time, because the Morningstar is by far the best attack bonus you're going to get early on. I ended up going with swords this time just to kind of see what would happen, because hammers basically just give you access to everything. You've got the high attack, you've got a lot of really good utility in their finisher set. And as he says, he's already getting very confident. You know, your cause is hopeless. Why throw your lives away? But either way, he's going to go around one-shotting everybody as he does. I was just showing off this because even though Vice has much higher level than he should normally, because he doesn't have armor, he is still getting full damage off this wizard. This actually comes up a lot. Like, I've seen a lot of discussion lately, especially when it comes to Reborn, like, oh, redo the levels are all that matter. That's crap. Class levels are just another mechanic. Like, they they really do not matter that much, especially like past those initial, you know, maybe up to like 8 to 10ish, but past that it really doesn't matter much. And even in that case, you know, he was still getting full damage even though he had a much higher level. I think it was like 2 or 3 times the level of that wizard. Doesn't matter. Anyway, end up getting charmed by the witch. Shockingly, that doesn't go well for them. We end up getting hypnosis out of that, or balmy breeze rather. Still, we're already taking 1s because of that nice passive defense from the knight. And yeah, we get some good things here. Now, this fight, just going back to it real quick, can occasionally be somewhat difficult, but switching to knight early on here definitely helps to deal with a lot of the casters and archers. The archers, as long as they haven't spawned in with heavy weapons, will generally just plink off. The casters usually will just go for debuffs once they see their damage. If you stuck with warrior up to that point, they will tend to use a lot more missile spells on them. Anyway, we put on axes here, because we're going to have a couple units that use axes in this upcoming fight, so it just kind of gives that +4 armor against that. It's not really super necessary, but I was planning to pivot into axes later on. Didn't end up doing so, but oh well. Anyway, so Vice takes our side here against Kashua, who we then proceed to shank again. Here's the first guy I was worried about. I forget why exactly I was worried about him, aside from his really high strength. But, I mean, comparatively high strength anyway. But he just basically goes down like a total chump, as you do. Really, it's when it comes to passive weapon skills, it really doesn't hurt to equip them. Oh, by the way, Sistina got vaporized. Oh well. We're still doing no damage to dragons, by the way, because we only took anatomy and not draconology. We unlocked the Beastmaster. But yeah, early on, it's really worth taking a lot of weapon skills, just because, yeah, anytime you defend using them, you end up training them a little bit. Being a solo type run, you're going to be seeing a lot of stuff being swung at you, so no matter what you do, it's going to end up being helpful. Either way, I forgot to mention this earlier, but I swapped out Lennar for hammers. Now, I left him with one-handed weapon skills. I didn't want him getting a finisher in this fight, but I did give him I did leave him with a Morningstar. I should have mentioned earlier, the Morningstar, technically speaking, came from what's-his-face? Came from Voltaire. So with Lennar here, he would normally have a Gladius and rank 2 swords. Instead, you know, he's got a Morningstar and rank nothing. So Bolus will just go around healing. This fight tends to be a little bit of a slog, but that's actually pretty helpful for us here. This is just kind of showing off that archers will gladly take a punch if they've got nothing better to do. You know, got herself kind of taken out there, but what can you do? I start using some missile abilities here against the bird because I don't have that many ranged attacks on hand, and the rocks are not quite great yet. Unfortunately, Lennar... actually, Bolus, I think, ends up attacking Lennar and gets himself counter-killed, so we unfortunately have to take some extra experience, but oh well. I know that seems like a weird thing to be annoyed about, but it'll make sense as time goes on. Basically, we can wind up this fight with level 11 knights instead of 12. It's, again, you want to have as low level as possible for your primary, you know, cheesing the level cap type system. Basically, because it gives us one fight later, we had to work around that. But this part of the fight, this part of the run is still pretty easy. So we get strength in for that extra 20% max damage. We get some speeches from Lennar, end up insulting Cashua again, shocker. The one benefit of using the Retroid for recording, though, was being able to take screenshots like this. You can't take select menu screenshots if you're using original hardware. No idea. Anyway, so, you know, more often than not, it speaks in support of your decisions. I just found this funny because, yes, so far she has disagreed with us at every turn. Anyway. So we talked to Nibith. He's like, "Hey, we're gonna fight. This is pretty great. I got skeletons. You got whatever your situation is over there. You know, what you gonna do?" And so naturally we go through and completely curb stomp everybody because this fight is a complete joke. Once you once you notice that you don't have to fight everything. Pretty much the funny part is that, yeah, almost any time, if you've got any party whatsoever, even the basic starting party, if you just, like, rush your highest Vit character forward, you can just beat down on Nibith no problem. They just simply do not have the DPS to take out your entire team before somebody gets up to him and just cuts him down. Anyway, at this point he kept healing, and so I actually let him live for a couple turns because I was really hoping to push him off a wall, but unfortunately, you know, didn't happen. Anyway, Sir Grion's wondering why we showed up here in such numbers, namely, like, 4. Man, that's just way too many. How can they possibly deal with 4 people? So everybody gets taken out as they do, and so we cut the entire team down to a solo, and proceed to do this whole kind of thing. So I put a Rending Gale on Grion early on so that he burns through some of his healing items as well as stays at relatively low health. With all of the archers and casters on this fight, it can quickly turn around on you, so you usually want to keep him at least somewhat low and make sure that he's at a place where he won't heal. So I kind of try to keep him aggressive. Usually he'll only use like 1 or 2 mending seeds, and that's it. Basically, he's a Pokemon trainer of himself. But what's funny is I think he actually has more than that. It's just all that he'll end up using. But either way, because of there being so many missile units on this fight, usually you want to try and just kind of keep going as long as you can. In this case, I started getting really worn down, got all the way down to 19 health, so I was like, screw it. We're taking, I think it was like an 85% on Grion, and we're getting out of this fight. Yeah, there's a lot of cases where you're kind of just rolling for that 6, as they say. So we end up getting more chainmail. We're kind of rolling into stuff at this point, and we look at the amazingness that is the Bronze Helm. Now, yes, it does have some lower defenses than many other items at this point, but that 5% reduction in all damage across the board, like, basically reduces all max damage incoming by 5%, 7% if it's crushing, 6% if it's stabbing. It doesn't seem like much, but for certain cases where you will be taking bonus damage, it's pretty significant. Anyway, you know, that thing can make the difference between life or death in a situation where you're afraid of finishers, basically. So axes are getting trained up in the background here. I just kind of slap that back on. Swords are already at rank 2, so we already have our one-shot kill finisher for now. You know, Obdaberta come in, Cashua gets killed off, Ravenous gets killed off, Vice gets killed off, and then we just go ahead and one-shot Obda, and we're done here. We get Resist Sleep, because we're already getting a rank of that for free off of the Espice. Now, we're mostly doing that to dissuade enemy units from using it. The thing with resist skills is you can rank them up, but by and large, just having the resist skill on there is usually enough to dissuade the AI from ever bothering to use that one in the first place. So in some cases, it's just as good as a proof. You're just potentially getting it ranked up and getting better odds if it happens to hit you in an AoE. In a solo, it's as good as just plain being immune to that thing most of the time. You know, we get the downhill fight. Not exactly anything terribly worrying here. As you can see, we get a Magic Leaf. That'll actually become important later. But yeah, nothing too crazy here. We just one-shot everybody. Mend Leaf +1s. If we don't get that drop, that run is basically dead. And yeah, then they have some time before support arrives. I like to think he's kind of just talking to himself. He's just got some weird inner monologue going on. Again, he's the Florida man. He's got some issues. So, we're not the enemy. We're just getting repeatedly stabbed by that guy. He's our enemy. So, you know, what virtue can there be in taking innocent lives, he says, after taking innocent lives repeatedly this entire chapter. You may notice, by the way, that while we are getting great ranks and stuff, we have not grinded whatsoever. This entire fight has just been a straightforward fight for survival. But because it's a solo, our ranks go up crazy fast, and because of class level cheese, for Chapter 1 at least, we're doing pretty alright. Like, 3 times their level seems like it would be a guaranteed kill on everything. But like, for example, right now we're talking about a situation where he's at really low health, and he's able to get hit by poison, and still getting overwhelmed by sheer numbers in a lot of cases. Like, a lot of these fights came down to the wire. Usually, if you've got high vit, this ends up rolling much better. Like I said, I like to just kind of run random stats just to kind of see what works and what doesn't, because in the end, you want to get all your stats maxed out anyway. Anyway, so we get avoidance, we get some vit, that poison mist still keeps coming in, start getting some better RNG on that. Paralytic wave is just missing repeatedly, but throughout all that chaos we end up getting swords up to rank 3. Get some loyalty to ourselves as you do, take out this archer, and that's the end of that. So yeah, that one can be a little bit chaotic. Sometimes you just have to eat those poison hits over and over. But that's the end of Chapter 1. Barely survived it on multiple occasions, even being triple their level, because again, it's TO, there's a lot more going on than just levels. The levels are not a good comparison stick. They're basically just like... The way that I like to see it is just, if 50 is their 100% mark, then basically we can see it as, okay, there's 3 times their level, so we're basically taking 12, so... Basically, we're 24% stronger than they are. That's the way that I like to see it. It's not, again, not a perfect comparison, but that's the way that it's probably more fair to see it. So, don't go blaming yourself. You did all you could. That is literally true. And then everybody's all sad because there's no Canopus there to cheer them up. And, yeah. And, so we move on here. Alright, so we start off with one of the earlier examples of Denam just straight up being an unreliable narrator of himself. Yeah, we did no murder in Balmamusa. I mean, technically, yeah, it wasn't a we, it was more of a me. Anyway, so she can't remain here because she's not having all that lying. We get a rapier, that'll become important later. Do some blocking, do some getting shot, so her finishers are still going to do a ton. And I believe I actually had put on the bronze helmet for this one, because that is going to be enough to shave some damage off of her finishers, which is going to be a pretty big friggin' deal at this point. Because yeah, those finishers will absolutely penetrate whatever armor you happen to be carrying up to this point. Like, you have to have insanely high armor difference to be able to make up for that. So, start using some spells, because archers are really weak to those, and eventually manage to carve over to her, right before she ends up getting the finisher. That part I do remember, because more often than not, yeah, if she gets a third or fourth finisher off, that's just kaput right there on the spot. End up burning through some more healing items to be able to get there, but anyway. There's already too much for me to regret, he says, you know, naturally in his best Batman voice. But we get a rapier. Less stuff seems to resist stabbing damage. That's pretty good. End up putting on resist poison. I really should have picked this up earlier. Usually the end of Chapter 1 is the best time to put this on. I've had so many runs end on Balmamusa. Anyway, so yeah, we're 20 at this point. Got resist poison. Got Zapan. At this point we can unlock Terranites, which I believe ended up happening here. So we end up taking out Cashua with Throwing Rock, end up taking Zapan out with a Rending Gale. I think I must have saved Terranites for later. They're not really necessary. You can unlock them here, and you can get some good drops off his people. But by and large, this is all stuff that you're going to be able to get in free bulk later. So just taking him out is fine. Anyway, so yeah, ill played. He put his leader out in front of the guy that can one-shot people. Moving on. So we pick up Golemy at this point, because this fight is not a great time. So with Vance, it's one of the first kind of sloggy fights that you run into. So you have Araceli. You can't really take her out early, so we're just going to end up taking out... We can just kind of leave Cashua to get sniped. It's whatever. Now, this is one of the first cases where there's a single drop... Well, I'd say maybe third or fourth case, actually, by this point, where a single drop can mean the difference between just entirely wildly different routes through a playthrough. because clerics are something that are incredibly useful, because if you get any heal ability, and this is actually the easiest one to get that's guaranteed, this fairy over here will drop major heal. And if you manage to get that, then you're able to switch into clerics, and if you can essentially use consumable spell items to carve through a Tynmouth map, leave just a cleric left, and then just have the two of them fight with Sibyl stabs back and forth, basically making use of infinite healing up to that point. You can basically rank up Auglight and Cudgels for free using that method. So, anyway, also this fight is also when you get access to the Rogue. That'll be very useful later. Unfortunately, not as useful as I'd like this run, but anyway. So Aircell ends up getting herself taken out. We go for Rending Gale here. So putting Golemy on is enough to put us up to be able to one-shot these golems with one-handed swords. I'm fairly positive without it we would not be doing this. It probably would be like 50-50 or something. Like, +4 doesn't seem like much, but it gets past their armor, so that's nice. Now, their fairy is a healer. Unfortunately, in this particular case, I ended up getting worn down. I believe they got a few lucky hits with the golem. That's the other reason that we pick up Golemy, just to be able to resist those big hits they put out. Either way, they kept getting crits, they kept getting hits, and it was just like, screw it. We're just one-shotting Vance, we're done here. It's like, oh, am I so powerless as to take on entire teams by myself? Oh, well. And so, yeah, picturing this exact moment is is why exactly this became the Florida Man run. Anyway, so we pick up more stuff. We pick up a crafting book we can't use, as well as 3 Mendleaf +2s. Those are also going to make a big difference later. All right, so Anatomy we've almost got up to rank 2. That is one of the most important ones to get up, but it's not one they want to stop and grind at any point. Really, there's only one. There's like 2 or 3 sections of this entire kind of playthrough where there's actually a safe moment to stop and grind for any length of time, and it's still like the most dangerous part of the friggin' run. So anyway, so yeah, basically a collection of a bunch of like half skills you'd never use normally. So yeah, Mr. Genzo here, he knows that face. That face is the one that keeps killing off Casual with throwing rocks repeatedly. You'd think she would have gotten the message by now, but that's fine. Anyway, we're gonna go fight some dragons, go get immediately overwhelmed by their sheer firepower over here, but that's fine, because we've got a finisher. Now, the thing is, if you end up damaging their leader, he'll end up running away. So what I was trying to do is basically get him to attack, get a counter hit off, so that I could get a finisher off on him, and that's exactly what ended up happening. So eventually he ended up running around, he took a swing, he got a counter swing, and then I finished him off because one finisher was not enough to do him in. Anyway, so we barely got through that one, but we unlocked ninjas. This one's basically free. And a Ring of Vitality. That makes a huge difference later on, because despite the Azure necklace being pretty much the best accessory in the game for the most part, Ring of Vit is something that's going to be even more useful as time goes on. Anyway, axes are still going up extremely slowly because we have yet to swing a single axe, but, you know, it's just kind of there. But we put it back on. Okay, and apparently this thing has froze. Alrighty, and time for part 3, because apparently my computer decided to freeze last time. Moving on. Alright, so next we get to the next big fail point of a lot of runs, and that would be Chaos Vice. So, this dude is a problem. Basically, he can definitely carve off damage pretty well himself, but unfortunately this is also a fight where there's a lot of good things to potentially grab. His Cleric can drop a heal, his Dragoons over there can unlock Dragoons, as well as lots of good kind of mid-grade equipment off of his units. Now, just ended up going for the, the one-shot finisher because we ended up getting overwhelmed before getting access to a lot of that stuff. This is another time when you can access Terror Knights, but either way. Went for the one-shot, as you do. Turns out swinging one weapon twice is as good as swinging 2 weapons once. Anywho. So, he says that we sent a scout. We don't need a scout. We are the army. So, basically can pick off squishies with throwing rocks at this point, cheesing both level advantage and anatomy advantage, which is just enough to put us towards doing full damage with basically throwing rocks and stuff. So we're getting full strength bonuses and whatnot. One-shotting units with that, get our first tier 2 missile ability. Another Magic Leaf +1, again, will become relevant later. Not for ourselves, but you'll see where we're going with that. Casual leaves, as she does. We don't even give her a chance to finish this time. And we start getting completely pounded by finishers. This was actually very close to the end of the run yet again. But, you know, Mend Leaf +2, kind of sneak off into the alleyway here. Start taking everybody out one by one. It got very, very close because I believe I had actually burned through almost all my healing items at this point. So I just started pecking away with rocks, you know, hopefully blocking a lot of the arrows, but eventually just had to pick away. Once again, just got very lucky, double dodging a Rending Gale, taking another block, and then finally ended up finishing him off. Yeah, it got very, very close. So this is one of those times where it was actually pretty helpful to have swords as the main skill instead of hammers, because that is one of those guys that can absolutely annihilate you if you don't hit him with a one-shot first. And in that particular case, yeah, it was just giving extra armor against those sword hits. Barely managed to survive. Anyway, so yeah, everybody has a little bit of a chat. We switch over to Boulder Gear. We end up equipping Parry to hopefully get out of some of those situations a little bit better. And again, got that close with this much of a level advantage. So that gives you an idea over how little class levels truly matter in the grand scheme of things. Anyway, so at that point we go into Helbaean. We're getting very, very close to that class cap here, but we have to be able to get out of Tynemouth first. Or rather, we have to get access to Tynemouth as a random battle map before we can do anything else. So anyway, Bayan dies. We go ahead and let Folkert die too, and just proceed to carve our way through this entire thing. Surprisingly, even with all our benefits, we still only do 1 damage to Folkert while he's got Phalanx on. And yeah, he goes smush, and that dude's wife is going to be a bit mad at him. Which, yeah, being afraid of your wife even in death, understandable. Every married person can definitely understand that feeling. Anywho, we have, by the way, it's not even a nice or mean thing. It's like, it's a weird thing that gets ingrained in, like, everybody. Like, no matter how nice, it's just like, oh god, I heard my full name, what did I do? Anyway, so yeah, we get more crafting books we can't use, we get some lightning stuff. You know, he's just getting more and more quiet and refusing to talk to people at this point. I love how Casual's like, we owe them nothing. This is all just about self-preservation, screw them. Anyway, so we get to Dagon here, another fight that can be very, very dangerous. I forgot to put on Golemy for this one. So we're one-shotting people, get access to some katanas. That's actually pretty useful in a little bit here. One-shotting more ninjas, throwing rocks at things, as you do. Doing a ton of damage to stuff, and this was actually the farthest I've ever seen Dagon go to the left, so that was surprising. But just making use of the alleyways to single out everybody, take them out one by one, you know, kind of defeat in detail and all that. Then we get Zapan again, and so this is going to be a... So, just pay attention here to this incredibly complex strategy, because it's completely mind-blowing, right? So, we put on all these different kinds of skills here, right? Yeah, see, apparently I didn't even bother taking a picture of it. All we do is run up when we hit him once. And that's it. I believe it was actually like a crit or something. Am I missing something here? I think I must have... Yeah, I must have just forgotten to take a picture of it or something. Literally all it was just like running up and hitting him once. Anyway, so, lots of setup for no payoff later. We're now at a point where we can't actually advance any farther. We're at level 28. It's going to be 29 for the next story fight, or 28 for the next story fight to rank up in a New Game Plus mode, and we would get absolutely steamrolled. So, to avoid that, we're resetting our level down to 1. We're putting on crossbows, bows, daggers, basically anything that can scale well early on we want to be keeping as a defensive skill. And daggers in particular, we're just going to take to go shank some stuff. Want to take out the healers early because it gives us a way to kind of make the fight, make any damage stick, more or less. We can potentially crit past their healing, but we're in a situation now where I keep hitting stuff. I've taken enough classes as a knight that there's enough vitality to be able to withstand these hits, even at level 1. But unfortunately, I can't one-shot their healers. I can't one-shot anything on the map. I don't have herpetology, so I can't really do much to the lizards. And the 2 clerics are healing more than 80, which is all I can really do. So we'll go for the tried and true strategy of just boosting our damage by 20%. So we put Breach onto a cleric and basically fish for a crit at that point, which is a guaranteed one-shot with most early game weapons. And yeah, then proceed to just block incoming stuff. Eventually get up to almost 28% proficiency with daggers just off our first fight, and then proceed to go to the next one. It just turned out to be a bunch of archers. Actually, no, this is even the same fight. It was the same one with all the same archers. What the hell is even going on here? Or did I switch to something else? You know, I don't remember. We'll find out in a moment. Anyway, was making use of all the missile abilities to wipe up the map. Yeah, this had to be... Yeah, no. This was definitely the first fight still. Okay, let's back that up a little bit and take a look at it. Yeah, so that's what it was. We fished for crits. We took out the clerics. Went up to almost 28% proficiency, or almost 28% proficiency with daggers. 3 archers left, 1 lizard, and yeah, just proceed to take them out one by one. Any crits with those archers end up doing a pretty significant amount of damage, but once all is said and done, we're still pretty low on health, and so I just started spamming all the missile abilities to finish wiping him out. I believe it actually was a lucky roll with getting 2 shots out of that thing that ended up finishing the guy off. Now, I know I'm mentioning luck a lot. A lot of this run is basically playing around luck and low health and all that kind of thing. There really isn't as much reliance on luck as it looks like, but again, this was a more careless run. Since I was able to fast forward through a lot of this stuff on account of playing on emulation, rather than original hardware for once, I did try to go for a way more reckless run, so there's a lot more kind of close calls and that kind of thing. Anyway, moving on, we get our level 7 on ninjas. Start taking a look at those axes, which are looking pretty nice, but we don't have access to that yet. Start thinking about spears. We'll work on that later. Anyway, we end up pivoting into sword and board with ninjas here just for a little bit better max damage. End up going for some one-shots on some wizards, as you do. Now, the thing with daggers is basically, aside from level 1, daggers, unless you have the best version available, suck at penetrating armor, so they're all, basically they're all bonus damage, really low max damage, and really crappy penetration, until you get to some of the later ones. So in this particular case, yeah, the switching into 1 HKs was just the way to go. A lot of potential one-shots, end up getting poisoned, end up actually using, I think I ended up using Quench to get rid of the poison here. It's funny because there's like, I think 3 uses of Quench that we get over the course of this run. I don't even remember where they all drop. They're just all kinds of random locations. End up getting more Vit as we do, and yeah, we got the first 2 katanas, so we're able to switch into something like this, and end up getting double attack, going for the double 1 HKs, basically to get that one-shot potential without fishing for a crit. And yeah, so it ends up leveling up 1 HKs pretty bit. Once again, we're, switching between sizes of pictures here, because of course. Priest ends up stealing our Vit card, but that's fine. We end up sorting away some lizards. Ended up, I think I ended up picking up Spellcraft just for later. Yeah, double attack's still doing pretty good at this point, but it's starting to get to the point where it's not holding up as well. We only have the 2 basic 1 HKs, and it's just not going to be enough to last us for a terribly long time. We get access to our first mace, as well as a longbow, and I believe this was the last ninja fight that I went for, because yeah, I was getting very clear by this point that these swords were just not holding up as well. We're still one-shotting some dudes, but yeah, it's starting to get close. Like, we're down to 22 health here. Yeah, end up surviving with 2 health, so it's starting to get way too friggin' close. So I end up pivoting into warriors now. Going for a heavier kind of bulk build. All our stats are above the 40s at this point, except for Dex, but screw Dex. And okay, once again, no healers, lots of lizards, so we deal with the casters first at low level. Like, casters drop off, but they're very strong early on. Archers are kind of weak early on and then gain power pretty quick, and then all melee units are pretty consistent. Pretty consistent threats, that is. So we get to this point, we, one-shot a lizard, weather gets bad, and it starts looking pretty dicey there. We end up rolling a parry, end up successfully putting that guy to sleep. I just barely managed to get past this one, too. Again, much more reckless strategies this time around, but just barely get out of that fight with 4 health. This is why this is that first, like, major grind point, and it gets risky. Now, this is without the use of hammers up to this point, I should point out. So hammers are uniquely useful when it comes to a run like this. I mean, they're great in general, but in this particular case, it's something that allows you to have access to a TP scaling AoE kind of missile ability. So Dying Sun, it basically just means that I think it's like 3-tile range or something, and it's a 5-tile AoE burst that'll more or less one-shot stuff if it's charged up. So usually what you do is you go for the squishiest thing, you squish them away, and then you nuke away some of the heavier hitters, and then that makes the rest of the fight much easier. Now the problem is they are slow. That finisher in particular has a pretty decently high cost associated with it, so yeah. Now the Morning Star is actually not that heavy compared to other stuff in its class, but as time goes on, hammers get kind of well, as you'd expect, heavy. So anyway, so moving on, we pivot into hammers, we start one-shotting stuff a lot more consistently. Once again, the perspective of this thing changes. Thanks, friggin' screenshot function. That's greatly appreciated. Shield bashes still being useful. I should point out that even with our hitting being this friggin' strong, just being able to push a unit sometimes can be the difference between life or death, because positioning matters a hell of a lot. So we get warriors up a little bit. Once again, the perspective changes. Dang it. Anyway, let's go ahead and do that kind of thing. Let's switch it slightly so we get rid of those white bars. Yada yada. There we go. That's slightly less annoying to look at. Anyway, so one-shotting units as you do. Now, I should have picked up Aug Ice at this point. That's usually what you want to do, because you're going to be getting extra penetration off that finisher. It doesn't seem like much, but it will make a big difference. We get our first two-handed heavy hammer. The Boulder Hammer is a kind of game changer when it comes to hammer builds. Just because a lot of classes get access to hammers. I should have mentioned this earlier, but a lot of these weapon choices specifically matter because of what classes they have available to them. Like, probably daggers, hammers, and bows and crossbows are going to be the most universally useful. Crossbows in particular, because just pretty much everything gets access to light crossbows, and their finisher has one-shot kill potential. But being able to get that far is the problem. Anyway, so we switch it back into swords, because the hammers have been getting a little bit risky. We'll end up one-shotting this archer, get that guy, get our bolter crossbow. Once again, making that crossbow setup look a lot more appealing. We switch into bolter armor, and then we finally get access to the rune fencer. Or rather, no, we're actually still trying to get access to the rune fencer. Okay, so the rune fencer is unique in that if you haven't gotten access to any healing abilities up to that point, basically you only have a few places you can actually heal from, so you're more or less stuck to your full health bar to get through a fight. You've got your healing items, but if you can't go to the store, you can't replenish those things. Health stealing abilities are a thing, but you only get them around Chapter 3 for the Terror Knight. So if you have Spellcraft that you've picked up along the way, yeah, that can be really useful. You can potentially replenish your healing items with rogues, because you can get +1 and +2 variants from your basic Tynmouth fights using the rogue, but you only have a few fights in order to be able to do that. So potentially that could be a bit of a problem for you. But the Rune Fencer, pretty early on, gets access to HP Infusion, which is your first proper regeneration ability, but it does have a high cost of use. Alright, so I'm still looking at that, still trying to get them, and we're basically going through all these different fights here. I'm trying to train up crossbows at least a little bit up to this point because I'm feeling pretty confident in our defense, just in our defense holding up here. So go for a crossbow and sword build. Alright, not looking great because we're already starting to take damage from wizards again, so that's a little bit scary, but we barely managed to get through this fight. We get access to our first rune fencer mark. We get the scorpion, end up having to use one of the better healing items to be able to even get through this fight. Even then, just end up barely getting past it. Have the fight of the century against this lizard until eventually we get through it. So we end up moving on to... What am I moving on to? I think I ended up moving on to rune fencers at this point. Maybe? What class is this? Let's see. Tyrant's Mace. So we did move into hammers. So what, did I move on to TKs? Is that what it was? I might have moved on to TKs. What is that? Yeah, I was showing that Vit is already up to 42 at this point. What the hell class is this? It has to be TKs, right? It's either Beastmaster or TK. I don't remember. One of them, too. Either way, dude with hammer at basically 0 health, again. Just barely surviving a fight on 8 health. Berserkers. Right, they exist. Sure. So we're going into Zerk at this point. Whatever, fine, we smash stuff with hammer, as you do. Terrible magic defense, but either way. I don't want to go into the heavy hammer variant for the most part, because, well, they need the shield. Either way, we're going to try to get access to Strength and 2 here, switch over to the Ring of Vit. Because, yeah, we're losing 5 Strength, but having access to that increase in attack and defense, as well as keeping that Vit bonus, basically that's worth sacrificing Stun Proof for now. So we put Resist Stun on there. The Pelta is put on in order to boost that to 10% extra resistance against stun. We have Herpetology at this point to deal with the lizards, and additionally are again trying to get Berserker to 15 for that strength and 2 to get that increased max damage. Yeah, so we're just one-shotting stuff with hammers, as you'd kind of expect here. At which point we ended up pivoting into daggers for a little bit, apparently. So, yeah, daggers are another universally useful one. I think I ended up chickening out of daggers, actually, by the looks of it. I think I just picked up the skill and was just looking at the kind of daggers we had available. Because Butcher Knife, with its +2 Vit bonus, is pretty handy. It's both Vit and resistance up, so that can make a pretty sizable difference. But anyway, take our hammer skill into the Terranite. Parry's actually rolled a pretty decent amount of times at this point. Anatomy is almost up to rank 3, and we're going to go ahead and change the picture size again. Yet again, I should say. And then we're going to go ahead and switch it right back again, apparently. Professional quality. Moving on. So this fight cracked me up because I don't think I've ever seen a sextuple lizard spawn like this. I forget what the hell that picture's called, but it just reminded me of that picture of like a bunch of dudes sitting behind a couch. You know the one. Anyway, so then we just fight some lizards. Because they have no heals, it's not the worst thing in the world, but because they've got a lot of damage, they got pretty lucky, and yeah, barely survived that fight. So yeah, that happened. Any dang ways. So, yeah, we keep going with the Terranite. We still have no spells that they can use. I was hoping to be able to do something with that, but nothing really came of it. Gaius Thunder actually coming in useful just because of weakening, lowering the damage of some of their bigger hit type weapons. So if you have somebody with a Balder Hammer or something like that, it's actually not a terrible idea to drop that on them. If you don't have access to a one-shot kill at the moment, might be a pretty good defensive pivot. Anyway, we get rank 3 anatomy, we smash a lizard, we get some clerics over there, some stuff happens, clerics go smush, etc. You get the idea. We do the same thing with Terranite for a while, we get more cards, we do more smashing. At this point, our Vit is getting high enough that we're having less and less actual situations where we're, coming out of fights with absolutely no health. For anyone who didn't know, Again, I don't know why you're watching this if you don't know this already, but yeah, every time you level up a class, you're getting slight bonuses to your base stats in the background. So in this particular case, I'm literally just cycling through classes for multiple reasons. For one, I want to get weapon ranks up. For another thing, I want to be able to get stuff like resist poison over there up to some degree. It doesn't ever end up ranking up in this fight, but if you do run into a situation where you can kind of mass cheese that, it can be really useful. But it ends up getting weapon skills up really fast. It ends up getting those base stats up pretty darn fast. Like, this was not a super long run, I gotta say. This is one that I've done over and over and over again because it's... honestly, I just find it relaxing. But either way. So, we end up pivoting into archers at this point. Oh, I forgot to mention the last bit, which was just you get gear. You get a wider access to gear because there's really only certain items I've had access to up to this point because you can't go to the store. So I have access to the base variants of pretty much everything, but I don't believe... Hell, there's a lot of weapon classes I just still don't have access to by now. I have gotten the Balder crossbow and the Balder bow, as well as... I don't think I've gotten the Balder sword yet, but it's basically those two are going to open up the most options, I feel, but yeah, it just kind of gives you more options as time goes on. So yeah, do the snipes, do the stabs. You keep the dagger on hand in order to do parries, because you can't parry without a weapon in your hand. So I just basically keep firing and parrying and countering and all that kind of business. End up doing a whole lot of blocks, end up getting daggers up while blocking and counterattacking. Put on True Flight because his accuracy with ranged weapons is actually still pretty crappy at this point. So there's a lot of cases where I was noticing that my hit odds were like 60 to 70%, so you know, we're not dealing with those rookie numbers. So we get access to a Zeiston, which means that it's more reasonable to pivot into spears at some point. Anyway, I'm not feeling confident in going into Rune Fencers just yet because their defenses are not fantastic. Anyway, they're like the squishy regenerator class, more or less. So we keep the sticker on hand in order to have that dex bonus and just keep on parrying and countering and all that kind of thing. I'm really not looking for damage off daggers, but it is enough to at least lay a scratch on them. So it's doing good enough. I'm getting bows ranked up pretty darn quick. I noticed by this point I actually forgot to even put dagger skills on, so that's kind of a bummer. I think I ended up using the last of the sleep abilities, but this guy to sleep and just run away and get a chance to heal, but unfortunately he just woke up and immediately started chasing me down anyway. Got a few lucky blocks and then finished him off with the spider ninja bullcrap ability. And yeah, Vit is up to 46 at this point. We're almost halfway up to max. Switch over to Beast Tamer, go for hammers and bows to make use of the hammer skill for just kind of passive damage and keep training bows up. Again, just kind of training everything all over the place. This is kind of cracked me up because this lady decided to actually get herself counter-sniped with a bow. And we're actually doing pretty similar damage. Anyway, go to hammers and short bows again. You know, you get the idea. More of this, and yada yada. We get access to a Balder Spear. That will become relevant later. Okay, so at this point we pivot into rogues, and yeah, this gives us access to steel, which gives us a few more options in terms of items that we can get a hold of. But either way, it's going to be pretty handy later, but it also gave us a chance to just go and just steal one of these dang things, because if you don't go in as a drop up to this point, I think it's like a 5 to 10% something drop. They're not actually locked percentages, just so you know. It's just your odds are somewhere about that range. Basically, it's like a list that goes up and everything switches and its odds to be available depending on, I believe it's primarily tied to class level for that one. Either way. Or your highest available class level, I think it is. So, either way, we get the mark one way or the other. You know, do that kind of thing. We stick with rogues for a little bit. Mostly just steal lots of pocket lint and mend leaves up to this point. Just lots and lots of linens, as you'd expect. Now that I think about it, it's kind of funny, because wait, if you're stealing their linens, are you stealing their undies? I don't know. Anyway, this thing appears to have frozen again, so picked up more chocolate out of their pockets, got more butcher knives, potentially would be useful later, but we'll never see that moment. Got a Shamshire, we'll boost some stuff later. And, you know, as you do, we've gotten to a relatively safe point. Like, once you feel safe enough to pivot into rogues, it's kind of starting to get to the point where, yeah, you can probably feel pretty safe getting into fencers, at which point you can kind of start doing a whole bunch of stuff. They've got access to a great amount of these kind of weapon skills that are pretty commonly available, easy to get a hold of, easy to make potential exploits out of. So we switch over to spears for a little bit, get more stuff, can potentially take these fights a lot safer because of that infinite health regen, which will be coming up relatively soon. Like, basically the problem is you have to survive multiple fights in order to be able to get access to it, and at this point, finally, we have access to HP infusion. So now we have infinite health as the Rune Fencer. So, basically just take all of the risks, just pretty much steamroll every fight that comes along with spears. It's a good class once you have the defenses to be able to make use of it. So, absolutely crushing stuff left and right, as you do. I proceed to continue going on this way until, well, for quite a few levels, actually. Let's see, we already got it up to 17. We get some better fist weapons. We get some better cudgels. Get some better hammers. We're kind of getting into Chapter 4 gear at this point. We get a Balder Dagger, which can make a major difference. This is the first guy to be able to get past that kind of like 15 wall there. Get access to Deflect. And it's at this point that it's starting to become clear that even with HP infusion, we're kind of running into some dangerous stuff. Get access to a siege bow. I will later hate that thing, but it's a long story. Anyway, so we're taking pretty solid hits. We're taking deflects and things. But yeah, even with all that... by the way, I was just trying to farm for a deflect there for a moment, just seeing if it was possible to do so. It did not go terribly well. But we move on with the story at this point because I don't want to overlevel it too far. Because this guy still can't make it past the level 30 wall. So we introduce ourselves to some politics. Everyone's talking about how they're going to go kill a dude, and so we run into this guy again. And we just run up and hit the guy. Moving on. Is that what it was? Did I end up moving that picture to an earlier point for drama earlier? I don't remember. Anyway, so yeah, Zapan happens. Lady gets stabbed. Oh, now I remember why that friggin' Zapan picture is there. I ended up basically suspending it for a moment just to show that he leveled up at that point, and that's when, yeah, that's what it was. I was like, why the hell is he way back there? But let's just roll with it kind of situation. Anyways, so yeah, this is a pretty steady steamroll. We just like roll in, stab stuff, take all their things, take all their loots. They come in one by one and they fall one by one. It's a total massacre and it's wonderful. Anyway, so yeah, you just spear everything, get a Caldia. We can't even use that because he just refuses to use lady weapons, I guess. End up one-shotting 2 units at once, as you do. But she was too quick to judge. It's like, oh, this person just handily massacred everybody. Must have misjudged them. So Vice challenges us to a fight, and he doesn't win. But he's as good as dead. He has, like, I don't believe he's even done 1 damage so far. And so we just agree that, yeah, you know, let's work together. This is great. I'm perfectly glad with working with these people. They seem just as misanthropic as we are. Anyway, so in this particular route, Nibith gets bored, and instead of going to pick up Divold to do his stuff, he ends up picking up Gildas here instead, who presumably gets saved in the other routes, and Nibith is just distracted this time around. And so this is the first, like, one of the earlier moments where you kind of start to see that, yeah, like, when it comes to Lotus and all of these things, they're real, like, as much as they're always held up as the bad guys of the series, realistically, they're just doing normal, everyday nation stuff. Like, pretty much every time that there's a bad thing that they've done, it was unintentional. Like, in this case, with the whole rhyme thing that ends up kicking off a huge part of the plot, like, that was just Barbas being a Barbas. Like, he's trying to brown nose his way up the organization so that he can get the Brynhilder and stuff. So he tries to take out the dude that took out his boss's eye in order to suck up to him, more or less. So he decides to go take out, massacre a town for that. Yeah, like, he ends up winning that fight, sure, but everyone's pissed off at him, so it doesn't really go terribly well. Even in the prologue, like, as much as they try to say multiple times, like, oh yeah, he probably knew, like, realistically, if you look at the prologue of the game, if they actually had succeeded, it would more or less prevent any of the wars from throughout the entire game happening. Because their whole idea was just go take Castro, put her up on the throne. Good, she's leading now. Everyone has a leader that they can rally around. Everyone can just sort of get along and, you know, business as usual. But that doesn't happen. Everyone ends up squabbling and fighting and whatever else. Anyway. So, yeah, these guys are talking about how stuff's actually going pretty great for the Resistance now. You get, somehow, Hector's team ends up losing, so you get their execution here. Definitely one of those somber moments. It's always kind of a cool fight. It's like, oh, you know, you get to, how was it? In deference to your honor, you're not bound, and you get armed as befits your former station. So basically, like, we'll give you weapons, fight out of your execution, but you're pretty much not going to make it anyway. Anywho, cool scene, and I totally forget this every time that you end up accidentally leveling up multiple classes. Anyway, Merton's surprised by Florida Man, and he joins us because he's the first one that doesn't give us experience when joining, so whatever. And now we fight Oz. And him and his multiple personalities are warping on up there. But, you know, she ends up getting completely annihilated. They actually got like 3 crits in a row, I believe. But either way, he warps his way up there, accidentally, like, crits Oz for 100-something damage. And so Oz ended up getting separated by complete fluke. I just went through and started carving through this entire thing. Just collecting a bunch of random crap. Because I wasn't actually sure what their drops are. It's not often that you're actually in good enough condition to be able to take out his entire team. And yeah. This part in particular, like, I ended up even making a Reddit post about it, because it's just funny, because he comes in all self-righteous and everything. And Oz actually makes a good point of, like, realistically, this entire island is fairly insignificant. There's a hell of a lot more important stuff happening in the world, and... like, none of this stuff matters. They're seen as the bad guys, but realistically, they've probably stopped way more wars than they started. So again, constantly held up as the bad guys, and yeah, Oz is absolutely a complete lunatic, so he's not exactly the best example of this, but realistically, they probably do more good than bad. At least intentionally. Anyway, so at this point, Castro finally gets the message and leaves. Gamp does the Gamp thing, you know, gets all of his dudes one shot, as you do. I was planning to go, you know, farm his clerics to go see if they dropped a healing thing, but he got himself killed off, so you definitely don't want to bring a spear here. Ended up picking up Swiftfoot and Jump. Jump's actually a lot more useful than Swiftfoot. Got Strength in 3 at this point. And yeah, go Sword and Bow for a little while just to get stuff going better. Because for this particular fight, it's a little bit different. This is actually what I saved all those med leaves for, and this is kind of a weird fight. Oh yeah, I ended up switching back to the spear, actually. No, I didn't end up going Sword and Bow. So you need a Balder thing of some sort if you're going neutral on this. This, like, neutral is harder on this particular thing, but there's other benefits to going down this route. So... in this particular case, yeah, Spear ended up being pretty useful. Basically used Wheel of Fortune to warp around, pretty much claim the middle, allow Dival to die, but then save Oleus, and then ended up... if you do this right, you can basically keep feeding her leaves so that she'll actually use Exorcism, and then basically one-shot units, run back, you know, give her a leaf, let her exercise, that kind of thing, over and over, until eventually there's few enough units that you can just finish off the map without having access to any exorcism abilities. Because, yeah, you don't get drops of an exorcism up to this point. I just kind of wanted to show off this trick. So, either way. So you can do that. It's totally a viable option. Anyway, you get the idea. We do the thing. He's upset about Gildas. We get some extra stuff out of it. Actually, having that leaden thing will be useful, and also leveling up clerics will be useful. You can't actually kill off Oleus. Actually, technically you can. One of them has to survive. If both of them die, it's a game over, but if one of them dies, it's not, and Oleus has exorcisms, so yeah. It is one of the only cases where you're actually required to save an NPC to progress. Anyway, they do a chatting, and where you recruit them? No. Are they useless? Yes. Anywho, we find Cassandra in a volcano. We do the stabbings and stuff like that. I went to stab some of her units to see if anything useful came out of it. Chucked some rocks at the witch. Her Ring of the Dead exploded. And that was kind of the end of that. Switch over to archers for a little bit in order to one-shot Cressida. That happened. And then we get to the kind of neutral Nibeth Mountain. And you can do the same thing. Longbow's got pretty long range. You snipe him in the face. That's the end of that. Gildus wakes up. Then he does not wake up. Cashua leaves. Everyone's a bit upset about that. And yeah. I haven't seen her since new and bread. I was kind of picture this lady as having a weird southern drawl. Somehow the day's already ended by the time Leonard gets outside. He's been looking around for a while. And, yeah, Cashua's off, talking about how alone she is. Anyway, Vice throws some dude off the roof. It's kind of hilarious. And, we proceed to do this fight. So, these guys can actually do a pretty significant amount of damage. They start to get pretty decent weapons, but what I was doing was shield and bow in order to snipe away their squishies, in order to hopefully get access to some maybe useful drop options. Just because it would be kind of out of the range of stuff that I would usually have access to. But eventually, health started getting low, had to go take the 400 damage shot against Gildora. Apparently enough to blow her eyes out 5 times over by the looks of those drops. Anyway, we get access to Draconics, not that they're going to be useful, but moving on. Pick up a Plume in order to do extra damage to these guys, just kind of Darth Vader our way through their entire pile, collect all their stuff, one-shot Zabos, and that's that. Get access to a few more... I keep finding, or I keep getting all these drops of different kind of divine abilities, but none of them are really what we're looking for. Go back to work on some new classes. We got access to Dragoons. I just noticed it's kind of running a bit long. We get access to Wizards, you know. We got Knives, got Castings, as you do. We got Warlocks 2 coming up right after this. I mean, it's basically the same thing. We end up working up Cudgels for a little bit there, too. Basically, I found a way to just do Cudgels anyway by, well, doing this. If you trap yourself between 2 clerics, and you can do this with barricades too, but if you're doing any other class, usually one will attack, one will run away, but you can eventually trap yourself between 2 of them until they rank up the skill for you. It's a dumb way to do it, but, you know, it's an option. Alright, anyway, so this continues on as you'd kind of expect. You know, smack stuff with the sticks, do the casty thing. Just kind of blitz through all this for quite a while. Gonna skip through all this stuff. We're starting to get a 100% hit chance on stuff like Bombing Breeze. Switch back to TKs for a little while to work on Cudgels. It was not a terribly good idea because that was another near loss. Switched over to two-handers for a little bit. It wasn't really worth it. Switched over to hammers for a little bit. Started getting dangerous. I was kind of trying to see if I could get anywhere with any of these skills. Lament of the Dead was definitely useful, but it definitely was getting more and more dangerous. So yeah, kept on going until we got into Damask items. Got our first Damask sword there with Rune Fencer. At that point, proceeded to continue on with the plot, and then we got the neutral mountain. So barricaded off a couple units, and basically just did a stand in the middle of the mountain against absolutely everything on it. Yeah, technically, you only need to take out some of them, but for some reason, they kept attacking me anyway. Alrighty. And almost completely out of time here, so neutral mountain happens, push stuff off cliffs happens a lot, and yeah, more pushing stuff off mountains happens. And it froze again, dang it. Okay, and back. Mendleaf happens, throwing rock happens, and the real fight lies ahead. And yeah, so he tells them to leave, they don't. You know how this goes. Like, this is a weird fight, and that they're actually pretty outclassed even on a normal run. Get a Balder blowgun. It's some interesting damage. Tried experimenting with it a little bit. It's not really worth pursuing at this point. Anyway, at this point, you know, Vice gets himself got. And pick up Spell Strike 3 if we need it. Mercury wants to have a fight. So we do that. He keeps almost getting himself killed off repeatedly. So I just kind of went around trying to collect cards, collect items, and nothing super amazing happened out of that. Just a few slight bonuses to stats. And yeah, can hit this guy for 500 at this point. So front line's broken. Oh no! Cashwell betrays the, Lennar. He dies, as you do. Ozma decides to stick by and have her fight. This goes about as well as you'd expect. Just, hitting everybody. They really don't stand much of a chance at this point because we just have infinite health, more or less. Can just out-heal anything they do. They don't even come close. You might say, we're... Well, you might say we're completely overpowered. Don't worry. The game's going to correct itself soon. We just have a weird happy bubble here. And so, yeah. Weird note here, by the way. You may notice that later on, this guy comes back crazy and everything else. By this point, he's still lucid and normal and everything else. Whatever actually happens to him, I never really thought about it. It wasn't Tardy's fault. Like, they just have a normal conversation at this point. And yeah, they throw him into a pit later. I don't think... Again, I don't really know exactly what happens, but, like... It doesn't... They don't really explain how he went crazy exactly. But, as usual, he's got a... They got a pretty decent point here. Like, people kind of do expect somebody to do the actual ruling part. Anyway, you know the lines here. I'm sure you've all seen this particular conversation a million times. Like, technically nobody's really gonna do the slightest thing to try and help themselves if they can help it. So, any dang ways. Was hoping to stick more on that particular one, but dang it, I'm completely out of time here. And basically he just points out at this point that she's taken over for ruling. He never came here to rule anybody. He's like, whatever. We originally wanted to make her rule stuff, so job done. We're out. And yeah, then we fight this guy. Goes about as well as you'd expect. He has no chance whatsoever. And then we go visit religious people and like, oh, I only want to speak to your leader, which is naturally why we proceed to shank everybody in this map. Only came to talk. Why do we hear everybody crying outside? Good question. Wasn't me. We get some sad backstory, yada yada yada. How do you think this guy dies? Like, with all of these one-shots and whatever else, like taking out bosses left and right, completely sweeping entire maps. What do you think it would be that would take out somebody this nutso? Which, by the way, I tried taking on Farampa. It got comically close pretty much immediately. It's like almost getting trounced by the very first map, so I was like, screw it. It is time to leave. Completely have no way to resist their debuffs right now. So tried going for a little bit of a steal run on these different maps. Still ended up at critical health multiple times. Decided it was not the time to be trying to do that, so we proceeded on with the story. And yeah, crushed this map well enough. Managed to... what the hell ended up happening there? I think that was the time that the thing crashed. I don't know. Either way, ended up taking out that guy. I think it was like... Yeah, was it Dark Weight? I don't know. It was just a one-shot with a slumber shot, as you do. And then we get to Chariot. Now, he's a weird situation in that he's not a hard shot, or he's not a hard fight. And in fact, we can one-shot pretty much a lot of stuff on this map, and proceeded to do so. But here's the thing. I was trying to get access to those heals to be able to do more infinite healing stuff. And go figure, of all things, like, by the way, this was pretty funny, in that the dude actually parried the counter fist. He parried the counter punch. But yeah, of all things for this run to finally die to, it was a combination of poison and a dragoon. And a dragon. Yeah. Ended up eventually dying to a dragon in a hole. So that was the end of the run. It was a fun run, but I just kind of wanted to just quickly share the kinds of nonsense that these runs get up to. The kinds of weird considerations they can go on. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of about that. So, When eventually I do end up nailing this run, I will be sure to share it, but until then, that's the end of that story. That is the end of Florida Run, the most misanthropic a-hole on the island that week. Alright, you guys have a good one. Take care. I really gotta go. Bye.